What's happening? Fast turn watchers, listeners, replay catchers, gompers. We are a little bit behind, so I apologize for anyone who's been hanging out in the queue. So thanks for bearing with us. Tonight we have a special guest, Stephen Peterson. He is the host and key interviewer of E-commerce Momentum podcast. And we were going to talk about a few other topics before we got into the discussion with Stephen, but given that we are already 10 to 11 minutes late, I will probably race through some of them. But for the most part, I think more people are going to want to hear what Stephen has to say, because one of the benefits of Stephen's podcast is that if you haven't listened to it yet, we'll put the links in the chat and any of the show notes I post anywhere. But he's done about 109, is it?
I just actually recorded 110 tonight.
Okay, so he's done 110 interviews, and let's say there's maybe 5 people who have gone twice, maybe even less.
Correct. Yeah, I'm going back every other episode now as much as I can to follow up, because it's been a year. So
cool. So Stephen has gotten the insight, the wisdom, and the strategies from, let's call it 100 or so different successful sellers. And success is obviously different for different people and how they want to be running their business. So a lot of people know that, it can be a lifestyle thing. It could be a money thing. It could be a mix of both. It could be a legacy thing for your family. It could be a part-time, it could be a full-time, and the definition of part-time and full-time for everybody is different. So Stephen really gets tremendous insight into what different people are doing, which, listening to 110 podcasts can be great and entertaining if you have the time, and if you do it week in and week out and it's on your bus ride or your commute or whatever it may be, phenomenal. But at the same time, you may not be able to be taking notes. You may miss some of the key nuggets. And I think Stephen's really been able to, I wouldn't say summarize, but he's kind of taken different segments and been able to go through a lot of these interviews and taken some key takeaways that I think would be helpful for everyone's businesses. So we are going to have that discussion with Stephen. Last week we talked a little bit about, the long-term storage and generating cash for additional inventory. We touched a little bit on the fact that back to school was coming up as well. And, the topic I wanted to talk about for maybe 5 minutes really was where you get growth from and where you get, how you can leverage your time a little bit more. I know a lot of people know that I'm very into time management, time leverage, as well as, shoes and clothing. And one of the things that I think, people ask me a lot of times is, tools, different things that I use. And last week we touched upon a lot of extensions. We went through some of them really rapidly. And so I think what we'll do is we'll spend a lot more time on this probably in a different week over these next couple of weeks while I'm sitting in for Dwayne. But one of the big things I think is, if you're a one-man show or if you have a team of people, whatever it is, leveraging other people is going to be one of the biggest time helps. Let's call it time leverages. And it doesn't have to be per se just like on a prep service. Prep is obviously one of the biggest and fastest and easiest ways to get time leverage. But the other thing is people in, kind of like the relationship networking kind of thing. And I know Stephen has some thoughts and feelings on some of what people will call a mastermind, but just in general, a lot of these groups, paid, not paid, whatever it may be, where you meet people, is basically where you can kind of gain a lot of relationships that you can leverage for later. So we'll spend another whole segment on it, but something that like I just see time and time again, and people are like, well, how can I grow? How can I leverage things? You're one person and you're one seller. And even if you have a team, other people out there, as much as we're competitors, people in the community really tend to be able to learn a lot from each other and leverage from each other. And it's just something that we can talk about at greater length, because I really don't want to cut Stephen's segment short because we had some delays getting off the ground. So without further ado, we are going to get into with Stephen. So instead of a standard typical interview style where I'm going to open a question and Stephen's going to answer, I think Stephen kind of has a lot of great thoughts and things to say about what he's learned from all the interviews and kind of can summarize things. I may stop him here and there to ask questions. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll pay attention to them as well. But I think there's a lot to be gained from what Stephen's learned and really from the 100 people he's interviewed. So without further ado, Stephen Peterson.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I hope to offer you a little bit of insight. So I've developed a talk, which I call, things I've learned. And I'm so fortunate because I do get to talk to so many great people. I mean, just amazing people and amazing stories. And, you get to draw conclusions. A lot of times I know what their answer is going to be. Once in a while I get surprised, but generally speaking, because you see a pattern. I did an interview earlier tonight, and again, 2 or 3 things came to me, and I'm like, I've heard that common thought before, or that common trait before. And you start to develop these over time. So as you listen to them, and I know it's tough to listen to 110 of me. I have trouble listening to. My wife won't even listen to them, so I understand that, right? But I get it. It's the people where the content is. And so, when I talk to somebody, and tonight I was talking with Eric Lambert. He's one of the Kentucky boys. And he's the third of the Kentucky boys that I talked to. And I got so much from him tonight that I didn't get from his partner and then their employee because I already knew the story and I still over time developed more questions. And so it's been so exciting for me. And, kind of tied into your next week's subject or whenever you're going to talk about it is those relationships. I've gotten to meet, I think almost every single person I've interviewed, I've met almost every single one. And we have a connection, and that connection is so deep and so strong now. It just makes it so much better. And I've hung out with so many of these people, and it just makes it so rich. So, the thing I start my talk about is that there are lots of ways to make money in this business, and you really want to figure out the one that's right for you because they're not all right for you. The thing that I learned the most in these interviews is the things I don't want to do. I think of Dave Matthews. And Dave Matthews is a mega seller. I think $8 or $10 million this year. Just great business. He's got a couple partners, and they do liquidation models. So they're buying stuff at liquidation from Amazon. Huge quantities, tractor trailer loads. One of their partners is an investment banker, and he comes in from that approach, and it's a great skill set, something that these 2 guys don't have, the other partners. But they're able to they love the business. They love everything about it, but it's an enormous amount of work. They downplay what the work is, but those are skilled people. And I learned that that's not a model that I want to do, even though it's attractive and they make a ton of money at it. It's something that's just not right for me. And so that's one of the real benefits of doing these interviews. I learned a lot more of what I really don't want to do. So, okay, do you got a question?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna interrupt you there. And I know how when you're doing your podcast, you're like, Andy always tells me I gotta pound them. So
yeah, I do. He says I pound people, and I'm sorry. These thoughts go through my head, and that's the way you really want to interview is because I think that if I have that thought, you as the listener have the same thought. You're like, Steve, why didn't you ask that question? So I asked the question.
Yeah, no, and that makes complete sense. So I think one of the things that when you talk about that, I think about is nothing specific yet, right? We'll get into when you go through your stuff, but when you hear all these different things that you don't want to do, are there things that you're currently doing that you say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to stop doing that now.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yes, absolutely. So, I'm not going to say my sales, but, I'm part-time. So I'm a full-time controller of a company.
Right.
And it's a pretty big job and it's a lot of responsibility. And then I have my wife and I, she helps in the business. We have a large Amazon business and we still have a pretty good size eBay business. We still have, I think, about 3,000 live SKUs on eBay right now. They dropped 1,000 because I didn't put in the UPC numbers. They're going through this whole database change. And it's not a clean change. They say, oh, just go in and add it. No, they changed the buckets of the database. So if you change that, put a UPC number in, all the other items that you used to have in buckets also have to all move. So it's very laborious and time consuming. And so quite frankly, they dropped 1,000 listings and eventually I'll get them reactivated, but they're not there. But so we got, I shipped 2,000 items last year out of our business on eBay. mostly eBay, a little bit of Amazon merchant fulfill, but generally speaking, I'm not buying anything for eBay anymore. I'm just not. I mean, I have a warehouse full of stuff to sell on eBay. I am not buying anything for eBay. So that's one thing I've stopped doing because it's really not scalable without help. You can sell, I know, you can approach six figures. We did on eBay, and it's very profitable, but it's just not scalable without help. You really need to get help to scale it to the right way, to run it like a real business. We have an inventory system, so when we sell an item, we shipped 2,000 items last year. So it was 35 items a week. So you can do the math, about 7 items a day. Well, go in the morning, you pull the 7 items and it's inventoried. So it's pretty easy to find, pack them in boxes and send them. Not a big hassle. But as anybody who knows, there's a lot of work behind the scenes to get it prepared for that. That work takes time and it's just not scalable unless that's all you want to do. And I don't want to create a job because I have a job. So that's what I stopped doing. The narrow focus. So mostly of our category, I think in the month of June, we're having a great June, double last year's sales. And 67% of our sales this year are shoes. And then clothing, I think, was 12%. Kitchen is about 12%. And then blah, 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 blah. And I started as a bookseller, like most people. We started on FBA in 2011. Thousands of books, sold thousands of books. Then toys, kind of that natural progression, DVDs, CDs. We've been doing it long enough. And now to move to shoes. And we moved to shoes, I guess, sometime last year. And now it's become our number one category. So my focus is that. I look at these other categories. I get offers for other deals. I see a lot of stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to pass, but thank you. I'm just not interested.
Right.
So that's come from a lot of that narrowing of focus. Right? If you really want to develop, you really have to really, enjoy what you're doing, but narrow that focus. And that's really happened for me.
Excellent. Cool. So, I think that's a critical thing for people to understand that. And I think some people, it takes a long time to understand that there's a lot of things out there, lots of ways to make money. And there are lots of things that are just not for you. And you have to kind of really want to like what you're doing. I mean, I think a lot of people, like, for example, perfect example, right? Dwayne taking some weeks off now here on his show side. It's not the business side, but at the same time, it's just, you have that flexibility, but you have to know what you like and you don't like, and you don't want to do it. That's not why we want to be in this. Like, you want to be doing what you're doing.
Dwayne mentioned when I interviewed Dwayne, we talked about romance. Liking your products. Additionally, he was another guy, him and another gentleman, same thing, who really liked their products. Otherwise, if it wasn't interesting to them, they don't want to sell them. It's got to be interesting. It's got to keep your interest. Otherwise, you risk this becoming a job. And, if you're building a lifestyle business, there's a real key part of lifestyle, the word life. You really want that to be an important part of your business. You don't just want to chase money because it gets you stuff. You don't need more stuff. You want that life and that lifestyle. And I think it's so important to like what you're selling. And if it's not interesting anymore for me, that's generally the rule of thumb. If I'm not interested, I'm going to pass.
Totally.
So, I've interviewed a Wholesale Model. I always like this story, right? Because I've interviewed 3 incredibly successful wholesale models. Todd Lammy, an incredible guy, brilliant man. And he'll do several $1 million in sales this year. And he's a full-time job. Still's never left his full-time job. He's a computer IT guy. He's not a programmer anymore, but he does IT work. And he created a wholesale business, kind of out of necessity, needed money, lost a job, needed money, and kept it going. And he said, the reason that he's been so successful is he kept out of Facebook. He put his head down and did the work. And he created a wholesale model where basically he contacts 10 people a day for 30 days. And out of there, he can get about 10%, 30 wholesale accounts. And then he, built this model where he buys consistently. He, every Sunday night, he places his orders. During the week, this stuff comes in. Now his wife is full-time in the business. But that model, he has been so successful. He's just scaling his business. And again, he never left his full-time job. And it's really interesting to see. He's just not in a hurry to get a job because he already has a job. And so he's designing a business, a sustainable business. And then tonight I finished interviewing the third of the Kentucky boys, Dan Metters, Eric Lambert, and Dylan Frost, who works for them. And those guys are going to do $8 billion this year. It's complete wholesale business. They don't work in the business anymore. They, I asked them, I said, well, how many boxes did you pack this week? None. How much did you buy this week? None. Did you source anything? Nope. He said, I didn't really go in the office. I did a little bit of accounting work. I still do that. But he made it to the gym for 10 or 20 hours a week. And he's designed, him and Dan have hired real strong people and have, I'm pitching a noise, a real heavy noise.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that from you? Or is that?
No, I'm going in.
Okay, sorry about that. Sorry. But these guys have created a business, and his episode will come out next week, where they have really stepped away from it because they've hired so well and they put procedures in place and trust to do that. And it's really amazing. And then Pat Rich is another person, and she blew me away because her motto is to go to trade shows. She just loves to go to trade shows, and she finds products at trade shows that she sees selling on Amazon, similar products. If that manufacturer has not brought it to market, she works with them to bring it to Amazon, almost in a private label way that Andy would do. Very same concept, but she gets to meet the manufacturer personally, and she brings it to market. And she's incredibly successful, just a terrific person. And all three of them are different models, yet they're all wholesale businesses, and they all work for them. Blows you away.
Cool. Okay, so next lesson.
Well, I always like the travel Tosh. I've interviewed a lot of people who travel and buy on the road. I think it was about 3 years ago. Andy Slamans and I met. He lives in Hershey, PA, and I'm in Carlisle, PA. So we're about 25 miles apart. And we met for breakfast one day, and we hit it off. And we went sourcing. I don't know if it was that day or another day. And it was like we were one of the first to go out together. And everybody's like, oh, my God, what were you doing? How did you decide who got what product? Well, he's the same way I am. Like, dude, if you want it, you can take it. I don't care. I got a ton of stuff in my warehouse. He was the same way. And since then, we've become best friends. You're talking about relationships. I'm so fortunate that I get to hang out with him a lot. We travel a lot together. We go to a lot of conferences together, sleep in the same room. So you get to know somebody personally. You meet his family, you have dinner, you get to see him as social. It's created a relationship that's just been so strong. And so you start seeing those people more frequently, and you get to meet them. So I get to meet that whole group of the bearded boys. And you meet like Chris Bond, right? Who's one of the heavy travelers. And I met him up by Andy's. We had dinner and that. I got to meet him face to face. And he tells the stories as he's traveling. He's the Kmart guy, right? He's famous for his Kmart points and free gas and all that kind of jazz. But he's a couch surfer, or he sleeps in a tent because he's kind of a free spirit. And that gives him the lifestyle that he wants. And then you meet Scott. Oh, I'm going to draw a blank on Scott's last name. Amazing, but he did 28 days on the road. And, you think to yourself, who could be away from their family? He said, well, Steve, it's not quite that easy. My wife flew out and met me for the last week, and we traveled our way back home. And I mean, that's really cool that he was able to do that. And so those kind of people that you meet, if that's the life you want, depending on where you're at, if you don't have young kids and you're at a point where you want to travel and see the rest of the world, to me, that's the beauty of this type of business. And again, it's different than what I want to do, but that doesn't make it wrong.
Right. No, totally. So I think, so on that point, I think the question I think about, and I never really, because like you, I'm not, I have a job.
Scott Zilke was his name. I don't want to miss that. I don't want to be disrespectful with Scott Zilke. He was episode number 40.
Right. So I was just about to ask you, because like you, I have a job, I have kids, a family. I'm not looking to do the travelage model. But I think for the people that are interested, in terms of like the number, so that's a number 40. Do any of, because I have to admit, like I tend to listen to things that are more, I wouldn't say pertinent, but more interesting to me. So if I'm on the bus and I'm like, hey, I've got 3 that I haven't listened to yet, I'm going to kind of select and I'll do that kind of thing. Do people kind of walk you through, like if there's someone, who's listening to this replay now and wants to know, like, how do these people ship from the road? Like, what actually do they do? Do they like bring printers? Do they go to UPS stores? Like, what do they do? Like, do they get into that in some of these podcasts?
Absolutely, yeah. Because I'm a detail guy, right? I'm an accountant.
Totally.
So somebody mentioned you do this part-time. I'm part-time, and so is REA, both of us. And REA is a bigger seller than I am. But we're gaining pretty quick. I mean, we have a great year. I mean, I'm blown away with how quickly the business is growing. So yes, and I've actually done one trip. My wife and I went to Rehoboth and went to the outlets down there, and we had it was such a great trip, and we shipped from the road. So, and our printer would not work. So went to Walmart and bought a $40 printer and print it right out of that. I mean, that's the beauty of this. So it depends on the person. So what I've learned, okay, it depends on who it is. So Chris Bond will start out, he brings his truck and his trailer. He'll start out bringing a whole bunch of Home Depot boxes from his location. He preps them in the back, right? He has them ready. And so, what you learn is that if they're staying at hotels, mostly hotels, stay on the first floor, make sure that you're close to an exit and that you can back your vehicle up. You don't think of those things, but when you're hauling boxes and you're trying to use, one of those carts, the clothing carts or the luggage carts, these are that you can get. UPS stores right by. A lot of people actually prep in a UPS store parking lot. I mean, and that'll be done. A lot of hotels have business computers in them, but today's, printers, I mean, the printer that I brought was so small. It was so, it's just so easy. They bring in, bags and rubber bands. I just had Jameson Filippi just came through my town. He was traveling to Connecticut. He did 36 states so far. Kid doesn't have a house. He lives, I hope you can all still see me.
Yeah, you're back. Don't worry.
I just saw some green thing flashed up on my screen. So anyway, he has been traveling, and I saw he was coming through, and I said, "Hey, when you're here, stop." He was in my town for about 2 or 3 days, and we got together, and I took him on an interview. I'm like, "Hey, do you need plastic bags or anything?" Like, "Nope, I'm all stocked." He said, "What I do is I have them shipped. I'm going to Connecticut. I have stuff going to be arriving in Connecticut for me." So the more sophisticated people who've been out on the road for a long time learn those things and have that stuff. They just buy it on Amazon and use the friend where they're going or the hotel where they're going, their address to receive poly bags and that kind of thing. So tape, you can buy at any place. Boxes, they're buying at Home Depot, Walmart, U-Haul, right? You can buy them anywhere.
Right.
So basically they're putting the hotel's address on when they ship. That's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And then they carry the boxes over to UPS just like you and I would normally do and ship them. No big deal.
Got it. It's interesting because, like, I guess if I were to ever do it, I'd probably think about just either having, my first thought would totally be like just dump stuff in the box and have Amazon label, or
some people do that.
Commingle.
Mm-hmm. Some people do that. Some people pay Amazon to label because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Right? It depends. It all depends. Each person is a little bit different. And every time I listen to one, I get a little bit sharper. And what's really become really pretty exciting is I bring people back on, and I just had Jeff Howard on. I was thinking about Jeff, and Jeff had a challenge or two. I can give him amazing advice because I have the experience of 105 other experts that I can draw upon and say, I've heard it done this way, this way, this way, and this way. And, I guess because I've been selling for so long too, I can kind of fine tune that to say, hey, here's 2 or 3 viable options for you that might be applicable to your experience. And I mean, it's been very rewarding because I heard the light go on in Jeff's head. He's like, oh, that would help me fix a problem that I have. And it's like, it's like, ooh, that's kind of cool, because that's what I hope to do is I want to help people because I get stuck, and so it's nice to have somebody who can help you.
So let me ask you, do you think, is there a quantifiable number? Like, so you're saying that like you're growing like crazy. It's been a great year. Do you think that there's a quantifiable amount that you would say is attributable to the actual podcast itself? That because you've heard what all these other people are doing?
Well, I'm definitely sharper. I mean, I'm much more focused because if you think about, if you listen to the podcast and you listen to the successful sellers, now, I'll give a little bit of context, right? So I send out an interview flow form to give in case we get stuck. I generally don't stick to it, but it gives me a place that if somebody's not giving me the answer, they answer me yes or no, right? It's not very interesting. I can go and get a little deeper. But I also do ask some background questions. So I do ask for sales figures and some things, and I share mine with them too. I'm very honest up front. because but I don't share them unless they tell me to share them, and they say, "Hey, please go ahead and say that," and so otherwise it's a respect issue. So I kind of know how they're doing. And when I sit back and I think about the common traits, again, I think it just sharpens what I do. So, I mean, would I say that, X amount of sales are tied to that? No, but definitely better for every time I talk to somebody, because I learned something from every single person. Every single person has something, because their perspective is different when they start or where they're coming from. So they're asking questions or challenging things that I might have taken for granted, and it just makes me that much better. So I'm definitely better. It's an easier role. Everybody says, well, how do you do all this? I used to, up until, I guess it's been about a month ago, I switched from 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. I was for, I don't know how many years, get up at 4 a.m. every single day, 7 days a week. And I would then about 4:30 get to my warehouse, work until just about 8 o'clock, go to work until lunchtime, go back to the warehouse for an hour, work the rest of the day. 4:30, my wife and I go to the gym every single day. And then I do my podcast twice a week for recording, and then 2 nights a week for editing. So it's a pretty full schedule, 7 days a week. And I shoot 7 days a week. Now I switched to 5 o'clock because of all people, Ariana Huffington just put out a book about sleep. And, I don't sleep that well. And so I really want to work on my health. So that's why I'm in the gym all the time. And so I'm really working on that. And so I switched to 5 o'clock. And what's been very cool is I'm just as efficient, because now I'm getting to the warehouse later, or sometimes certain days I have Rotary and different things I'm involved in. I don't go to the warehouse, and I'm so efficient. I can just blow through inventory because I'm purposeful. I'm kind of focused. And I got that from the podcast, because if you listen to the really successful sellers, they get their work done and they move on because they have no choice. They have to keep it going.
Yeah, I totally can relate to that. So that's really cool.
Time management thing, right?
Yeah, that's really excellent. I mean, I think some of the things that you've already hit on, though, are really there's such bigger points that people don't necessarily really think about, in terms of the little things that people do, or the ability to learn from 100 different sellers. And that kind of, like you said, it touches a little bit of what I was mentioning earlier, and that is just the groups, the relationships, there's lots of, the topic, like I said, I would talk about it at length at different time, is, these paid groups that, I have obviously involvement in some of them and not others, and lots, and who knows what. But the point is that that's really where you're going to make some of these even deeper relationships. So you have a tremendous value of getting access to 100 people. And like you said, you and Andy now are super tight friends. Now, whether that drives, $100,000 in revenue because you partner on something or not, that's between you and Andy. But the point.
No, I'll talk about it. I'm open about it. We're open about it. We do, I think, 3 private label products together. It's his. I mean, I don't want to take any credit. He's the brains. I'm just I'm the eye candy. So, yeah, he's Mr. Muscle, right? We do 3 private label. I buy them from him, and I pay him a little bit of a premium, because I don't want to. They're his items, and I have respect for him. They're his. But a few times he's leaned on me, because I have a warehouse, and I have a pretty large warehouse, and his products sit in my warehouse. Once in a while, I'll be like, "Hey, we're going to run out of product. Could you send some in and keep it so we don't lose the listing?" Absolutely. Anything you need, of course, because you've done so much. So I partner with him on Sing. Greg Purdy's a great guy. I've interviewed him. I think he was episode number 2. Just a great friend. And Greg and I partner on a couple products. Liron Hirschkorn and I, and Asad Siddiqui, I mess up his name again. We were just in New York City, and actually Liron and I were in New York City before then.
And nobody called me. What's going on?
Yeah, sorry. You were working. We partnered on buying. We bought, oh my God, I didn't plan on spending that much money, and he made me spend some money that day. And we made some group purchases. And then we added Assad a couple of weeks later to another conference, or a shoe show we went to, and he came in on some deals, and we all bought. And so those deals I've made. Who else have I bought with? I bought with a lot of different people. I get approached for a lot of different people. I'm in a lot of different groups. I join them. I generally don't buy from them. I get probably access to most all the lists that are out there. I generally don't buy from them, but I think why people give them to me is they want me to talk about it on my podcast. And I understand that. And my theory on that, I will never badmouth anyone. I think there's an opportunity. I think everybody's group, everybody's list has a place. And you
Mm-hmm.
gotta find the one that works for you. You got to find the group that you connect with. Connecting is so much more important than getting a list of crap to buy. Because let me tell you, you can go to, I got a Target a mile from me. I can go there and buy crap tomorrow. I won't, because I don't go to Target anymore. But that's not the joy of the business. The joy is that relationship, that connection, and you find it together, and you grow. To me, that it's kind of a soul thing. I love that. I just love when I see people connecting like that, and there's a difference about them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I tell people all the time. I mean, obviously, I am Brittany, Ross, and we own a list service, Your List, YourSourceInventory.com, and I tell people, at the end of the day, like the list is however many leads any of these lists are, any of these services, right? It needs to be two things. It needs to be like a starting point for you. Like you should be able to grow off of that, in the sense of, if I give you 10 leads, you should be able to easily find another 10 or 20 on your own using that. And then at the same time, like you have situations where the groups are not even about, like, I don't care per se about what they're telling me to go. It's much more about what you're learning from that.
Yeah.
Whether
Absolutely.
you buy it and it doesn't sell, you buy it and it does sell, and you can go back and get more. Or you join a group where it's not even like they post some stuff, but it's a lot more about the education, right? So like, I have that free Facebook group for Your Source Inventory, where we kind of try and give a little bit of education. And then we have a paid Facebook group where we give a lot more education, a lot more leads as well. But in my thought is always that if you teach someone something, so in your dealings of having 100 lists or whatever it is, access to however many lists you have, it's really about that connection. I totally buy into that.
I'm fortunate again, so when I get somebody behind the scenes and they're like, hey, I really need some help with this or whatever, I can point them to you. And, it's been very good for me. And, I'll use Kristen Ostrander as my first example. She has a group called Mommy Income. Amazing group. I'm in there. That's one of the mommies. But I answer once in a while. You're in there too. But, she's just a great lady. And it was somebody who approached me and they're like, hey, I need some coaching. I've got problem. And there was just legitimate problems or whatever. And I asked for Kristen to do me a favor. And she did it. And I said, you tell me what you want. You can have anything you want. I'll do whatever you want. And she hasn't asked for anything, but I will, because of that. And that's what it's also given me, is the opportunity to help somebody, because you can tell when somebody's real and needs some help. And so that's given me that relationship with Kristen where I can say, hey, can you do me a favor? And she said yes. And so that's been very cool. The groups, I think it's about learning, again, think about it, right? If you look back a year ago at your business, you're probably not buying many of the same things you were buying a year ago. And you have to ask yourself why. Well, maybe they're not available. Or then again, you've got experience with it. You start to look at it and saying, yeah, I could sell it, but that's a hassle. And I have this hassle factor. I don't want anything that's a hassle. I bag everything pretty much as it goes in, because we all know what happens in the warehouses, right? But outside of that, I don't want to have to put on all these extra labels and do all this extra stuff. That's hassle. I don't want hassles. I don't want to have to put 6 in a bag and mix it. Bundling to me is a hassle. I don't want to do it. That's not for me. There's some people that are amazing at it. To me, that's great private labeling. That's not me. So I learn what hassles are, and so I don't do them anymore. So I think that's what you get from those groups, is you see in your shoe group, for example, you start to see that women's sandals are selling this time of year. Okay, well, that's a pattern, and you start to understand that. And then all of a sudden you see access to other places that have sandals, and you start to learn those things. And I think that's the real value of the lists, is most people don't stick with the lists, or if you do, you stick with them just because of the camaraderie, not because you're buying from the lists.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And I think there's a lot more on that. So I don't want to sidetrack you from all the things you've learned from all your 100 interviews.
No, it's this is all relevant. I see Michael ask, if all you do is buy lists, buy what lists send, you're missing a great opportunity. Why an item makes it on list? Absolutely. It makes perfect sense, right? And, quite frankly, when you're in a list and they're talking women's shoes, I don't know as much about women's shoes, and you would make sense, right? And so you get the benefit of having these others have these discussions, or different age groups. Now that I'm getting older, younger people are talking about things, and it's like, oh, okay, now I start to get that. That's another big benefit to these groups.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to that point, it's funny, like, a lot of the sellers are in different parts of their life cycle, right? So, I work out, so I know the workout space really well, right?
He doesn't work out. I've worked out with him and Ryan with Tesca. Let me tell you, CrossFit, these guys killed us.
Well, we went. You didn't join us. Then we went.
I couldn't. You guys. There was a reason I couldn't make it.
And Andy and I then went that next time without you. But so that space I know really well, and so Brittany, she knows a lot of things that I know nothing about, and at the same time, then I have my 15-year-old daughter telling me things, and I'm like, that's what kids are wearing? You got to be kidding me! And then my 12-year-old son who plays in a basketball league, you look at all the kids' sneakers and you're like, I would never have picked those colors, but like the brighter the better, or the stranger the better. It's just the trends kind of move. And if you're at a different point in your life and what someone's wearing in the office, right? Like I'm on the subway, I see those shoes that people are going into, the buildings in Park Avenue, that kind of thing. So I totally agree that the group knowledge that different people have is just going to add tremendous value, which
it's perspective. It gives you perspective,
which totally goes to your 100 interviews, right? Like you've got 100 perspectives, 109, 110, and some, couple of repeats.
But some amazing, just amazing stories, coming from nothing and being a success, running into trouble and overcoming it. I mean, that stuff, it just blows your mind. And that's what I'm always looking for. Hey, here's a great story. So this episode comes out tomorrow and it's an 18-year-old kid, and he messaged me a couple weeks ago, and I get a lot of people say, hey, you should interview me. Now I get, because I usually can get, I'm not bragging, about 25,000 downloads a month. And so I get PR companies reaching out to me, hey, you should interview our clients and blah, 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 blah. Right? So I just want a story because, quite frankly, I try to make it interesting. I hope I make it interesting because I want to hear a story. I want to understand where they're, because this stuff just doesn't start. Nobody sits there one day and says, I got an idea. I'm going to go sell shoes on Amazon. Oh, it doesn't happen like that. Usually things happen. Yeah, no money in shoes. Mendy, I know Mendy, right? I love Mendy. Mendy is one of the smartest guys I've met. Anyway, so they don't just start magically, right? There's something in the past that's brought them as far, and then they go a little bit further, and then this happens, and they go a little bit further. And as Joy Packard says, it starts to lead you to something. Everything leads you somewhere. And so that story to me is really, because I think people don't recognize those points of their life and see that they were opportunities pointing them in a direction, a skill set. There are skill sets in this business that are very handy. And if you don't have those certain skill sets, that's okay. You can hire around them because there are lots of people offering services. But the key is that, Gary Vee talks about that self-awareness, understanding what it is that you really love and enjoy, and then make sure you enhance that and do that. And so this 18-year-old kid reached out to me, and at first I'm like, and his story about dropping out of college compelled me because he was studying I have a younger son in college. He's going to be a junior this year. And he's my last. And so it was a very compelling story. I really want to understand what's going on in the education system because, I have a college degree and I have an advanced degree, and I have a kid in college. My older son went to college. My wife went to college. And I start to worry about the people that I hire. They don't learn a lot of stuff, and so I start to see that. And so I wanted to hear what his story is, and it turned out to be a great story. And I think it's a really great episode because he's so self-aware. Imagine, REA, I doubt that you were as self-aware as this kid is at 18. I mean, just think of how clumsy and funky you were at 18, right? And to be self-aware, to know what you're really good at and what you're going to be good at that age, is a very cool place to be. And this kid is, and I'm blown away. I'm investing in him. I'm going to invest some time in him because I want him to be so successful because he's figured it out at that age. That's cool.
It is because I think, a lot of times people who have different, I don't know the story, but like have challenges or had to, kind of conquer on their own. Some of the things that they can learn at so much of a younger age and accomplish is far greater than, someone who is not faced with some of these challenges. Like we joke like in the business world about like the millenniums and these kids that come in and have these expectations. But And not always for the bad. Like they have certain things that, you know, you look at the technology today and things that have evolved. I mean, even just in the FBA world, like if you look at, you know, 3 years ago, what was out there and what you could do versus today, the technology, the extensions, all the tools, the prep services, the amount of leverage you can get, one person can get is unbelievable. And so it's the same thing. Like, you know, kids coming out of school, whether, you know, it's high school or college, whether they want to go into a profession or they want to be entrepreneurs, they, you know, for all the, you know, people are like, oh, complain about this or that. At the end of the day, like they have these visions that people 20, 30 years ago wouldn't have had because it was like an impossibility. Whereas today, you know, it's almost like the word impossible is, you know, not something anyone should ever be saying.
You know, and honestly, if you have kids, you really should listen to the interview because I think it'll help you. It almost gives you permission to start doubting whether, I mean, because let's face it, we want our kids to do better than we did, right? It's nice to be able to say my son went to Drexel. I mean, it's a big deal. He's a chemical engineer. I mean, it's a big deal. You know, it's pretty cool. But okay. Okay, we're past that now. Now what am I going to brag about, right? It's what you want is happiness. I want them to be happy. And, you know, I think it gives you permission to sit back and say, you know, maybe he's not going to go to Princeton and that's okay. I mean, I think that you need permission sometimes to have that because if you hang with your friends and they're talking about their kids who are all going and blah, 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 blah. And what was really interesting when I asked this young fella, I said, his name's Ian Goldstein. And I said, Ian, you know, how many of your friends knew what they were going to do when they went into college? He said, 2. He knew what he was going to do. They didn't really know. They mostly are taking general courses and general things. And that was really telling. You know, it's just, and I think there's a lot of people who haven't figured out what they want to do. So they go to college because their parents said they got to go to college. And you and I are in that generation. I'm a little older than you, but of course you had to go to college because, you know, my parents were factory workers. So of course I had to go to college. I was one of the first to graduate in my family. It was expected. So then I go to, you know, my first is born and my first is a lot older than my younger. Our kids are 11 years apart. Of course he went to college because I went to college. My second one, now you know, it's 11 years later and I sit back and I say, you know, I'm not so sure that everybody should. And so I think it's a permission thing. And I really think it really helps. It really helped me because I think about that age. Imagine a kid at 18 being so self-aware and know that he's not going to get the value. And I'll give a little bit of the plot away, is his senior project would have been to design a video game. And then he could go get a job with this video game. That's what the head of the computer science said, man, this is going to be amazing. When you're a senior, now he's a freshman going in.
Right.
4 years from now, you're going to design this video game. And that's what's going to get you a job at Google or Microsoft. He's like, Steve, I designed my first video game in 7th grade. I'm not waiting 4 more years to design something that I've already done, and that's not going to help me advance.
And work for someone else to do it.
Yeah, and so his first class was art history. And so, I mean, it's an interesting story, and I really was interested to find out about that generation and what's happening. And so, you know, here's one more thing to think about. This kid has done nothing but lived on computers his whole life. So these scrapers that you talk about or these Chrome extensions that come out every day. I mean, there's one every day. I'm working with a guy on a particular one that will blow you away. And so you sit back, there's no learning curve. They do not have the computer learning curve that us older people have. They immediately jump to the head of the class. Dang Lee is out here. I see him. Dude is smart. Dude is super smart. Charming, but he's smart. Jump to the head of the class because he didn't have any learning curve. He's just got to figure out the nuances of Amazon e-commerce versus poker in his case, which was he was doing. But it's just that learning curve is gone for those kind of guys. So you really have to up your game. You know, us who sell, we really have to up our game.
Got it. No, I agree, and I think, you know, it goes back to these different perspectives. You know, so. We talked a little bit about the wholesale model, that there are so many models inside wholesale alone that are super profitable, or, you know, people are doing it different ways that works for them, right? So the key point here is just doing what works for you. We talked a little bit about the travelage. I know you have a few spouse situations.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about like what's a big takeaway, big learning thing or point that someone can have, if someone's thinking about or has a spouse working with them.
It's a respect issue. That's really what it is. So Mike and Brittany Ross are a great example. I mean, he's such a great guy and she is amazing, right? And he's great. She's just as good. So they're competitive and there's a little bit of an edge and this and that. But you know what? It works because there's such a mutual respect. And I think that's the key is you have to be respectful. I don't know how it is in your house, but sometimes I'm not so respectful. And I know it, or vice versa. We've been married 30 plus years. So guess what? You get to, you say things. You have a different discussion than you would. You're not that professional that you are in your office when you're at home, right? I mean, let's face it. But you've got to pull that back, and to make it really work, they're a great example, and they're not the only one. But I mean, it's just so neat to see that respect issue. You each have something you bring into the group, and to the team, and so recognize that and stop the home. Home is different. This is work, professional, and so that respect issue, that's really what your takeaway is.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I think there are some people, right, who they're afraid to do this with their spouse, and some people who like they naturally like this is going to be great. Like you look at a David and Ivy Hawkins.
Oh, amazing! When you see her look in his eyes, I tell this story because we were just in Florida together, and when you see her still look in his eyes, I mean, he's such a great guy, and she's amazing, and they spend days in a van together with the dog. They drive this little van and they drive around, and yet she still bats her eyes at him in a great way. It's just so cool to see. It's just so cool to see. Again, it's that respect issue.
Yeah, no, definitely. So what other, I know you had like segments of like models.
We do have segments. One I want to talk about, because this is something else to think about. I notice, I'm starting to see patterns of people doing this. So a lot of people are starting their own websites more so to get wholesale accounts because it gives them some legitimacy, because you're trying to get legitimacy. So I do a lot of trade shows and I go to them, and it used to be where everybody would be like, hey, no e-commerce sellers. Now you go to a trade show, you're the 18th person as an Amazon seller that just popped into me. Most of them will say yes now. So now you have to set yourself apart. So a lot of people are starting websites, Shopify sites, or whatever. I like Brandon Dupsky, and Brandon was episode 42. And Brandon's story is, and I'm not going to go in the whole story, it's worth listening to. He was one of the top eBay sellers. I forget what year it was, but he was one of the top 10. Think about that. Not top 100, top 1,000, top 10 sellers on eBay before eBay went into China. They go into China, they open up a Chinese office, boom, all of a sudden all the knockoffs are there. His business is gone, bankrupt, over, business is gone. He then reads the 4-hour work week. He sets up a 4-hour business. He spends about 4 hours. Every time he messages me, he's sitting by his pool. I'm like, that's just mean. Stop sending me these pictures. He's like, oh, Steve, I'm working right now. And if I can see him sitting by his pool, his feet. I'm like, that's not pleasant. But he's traveling with his family right now. And his business is, he does about 10% on eBay, 10% on Amazon, 80% on his own website. He is now, his work, he doesn't work on the product. He uses an outside company to fulfill for him, completely does, the packing and the receiving and all that kind of stuff. They do invoicing. Everything's done through a third-party company. His work is done on traffic and build an audience and stuff like that, because that's what he enjoys. That's where he is in his life. But he designed it. He was so intentional about it. And I think it's such a great episode to realize that there is life outside of Amazon, eBay, or Macari, which I just heard about from this kid last night, never heard of it before, Etsy, those kind of things. And so I think you just got to figure out, again, what you're looking for, what you want. My episode that'll come out next week with Eric Lambert, he talks about the way they designed their business. They wanted it to be a certain way, and they achieved it. But they saw it. They knew what they were working towards, and then they put their head down and did the work. I think that's what's key for a lot of people, because I see people dropping out of Amazon lately. I've noticed that. I don't know if you noticed that. People giving up, kind of saying, I can't make any money, that kind of thing. And so it's really nice to see people who focus and do what they want to do, the piece of the business they want to do.
That's really cool. I mean, I think, I spoke at Sam's ACE conference, and I kind of talked about, envisioning where you want to go knowing, having a why and a goal. And I think it kind of all meshes with that in the sense that you kind of cut out the things you don't want to be doing. And you definitely, you focus on the things that you like. So it's interesting that I don't even recall listening to that number.
He's such a great guy. I mean, he's so unassuming, yet when you hear his story, I mean, he's the real deal. I mean, I've seen his sales. He's a 7-figure seller, and he's living his life. He's invited me to go to China with him next time he goes because he knows what he's doing. He's been buying from them for so long.
Yeah.
I'm actually thinking about Andy, and I
was going to say, you should just send Andy for you.
No, well,
I want to do something and get on a plane.
So yeah, I mean, there's a ton of other. I mean, of course, there are RA people, and I use, David and Ivy Hawkins is a great example. They'll do $3+ million, all 100% RA, 100% RA. They lifestyle travel. They'll be in Florida for a month. They go to Hawaii for 2 months. They have designed their business intentionally, and I don't want to miss these two, number 48, 49, and 50. I call them the triple threat, right? So it was Sam Cohen, Brett Bartlett, and Will Chernland. And, everybody's like, who's Will Chernland? Well, Will Chernland's a 25-year-old. When I interviewed him, he was 25. And he brought 2,000 products to market, 2,000 products. He was getting ready to go down to South America for the winter because it's cold up in Wisconsin where he's from, and Michigan. And I mean, he'd do $10 million in sales. Brett Bartlett. I mean, if you have never met Brett Bartlett, if you don't know who he is, you need to. Brilliant. Amazing guy, just an amazing businessman, but just an amazing guy, guy, real, and that's what you want. And Sam's larger than life, and I always tell him he's a salesman. When I interview him, it's like herding cats. He's like, he never heard that phrase, but it's the truth.
He never heard that phrase?
Yeah, he said he never heard that phrase.
What?
I said, but he's like, because he's hard to reel in because he goes right into a salesman's pitch. But in fairness, he delivers. You could say what you want, and he is a salesman. And he shouldn't apologize for it because he believes in what he's doing and he delivers. He consistently delivers. He over-delivers. You and I were at that conference, 260 people. I didn't meet a person who's saying they're struggling or failing that didn't get the help that they need. And the people, and I said this to Sam because, a couple people dropped out and he got a little bad press out there about it. But to be fair, you got 97 type A personalities that are succeeding. That's amazing because that's what I said. That's where I used it. That's like herding cats to get all those type A's to do that well. I mean, I've met people that are just knocking in the park. So those three, the big sellers, and they have built true businesses. I mean, it's true and organized business that they could sell tomorrow.
Yeah. And it's funny. So like, I don't know Will personally, but I know Brett and Sam both very well personally. And I talk to them pretty regularly. And it's funny because they've both have built real established businesses. And at the same time, their businesses are so different. They've taken different paths. They focused on different things. But at the end of the day, they've built teams that have truly built a business that, they walk away tomorrow, they could sell it, or they walk away tomorrow, it'll keep going without them. They have full teams that, are trained to do what they wanted them to do.
And it's a big organization. That's not what I want. And again, I learned those are the things I don't want. I don't want to have 12 people. I don't want the responsibilities of that. But that doesn't mean that I can't take advantage and use Brendan from Prime Zero Prep or John Bullard or Benzavi out in California as prep centers. I can, and I can have them help scale up my business. And that's a real powerful thing that's going on that you have access to. Every one of us have access to that wasn't there years ago.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember when the prep services just were starting, it seemed like the biggest no-brainer to me when they were like, well, this is what we'll do. And I'm like, okay, when can I start sending you my stuff? And Michael's in the chat. I know he's on.
Yeah, Michael's got a great program. I love Michael's episode. He'll know his episode number. I won't remember. I'm sorry, Michael.
And
I can look at his number.
I'm just moving around because I think my light went off.
Yeah, your light went dark. Michael was episode 21 and his CoOp Warehouse. It's genius. I mean, because, they charge a fee, but they handle the work. And you're invested in that success. He's invested in your success. And I think it's a great opportunity and they're doing it, and they've been doing it. And I think that's a great example. The other benefits with working with Michael and his group is you get access to a kind of a mastermind. I hate to use that term because you're right, I don't care for it, because most people don't understand what a true mastermind is. I call them micro networks. That micro network that Andy and I and you and a few other people have, that's the powerful thing. It's deeper. Andy
Right.
had a little bit of an illness. Who's the first person he called besides his wife? He was with her. He called me and said, hey, blah, blah, blah. That relationship is deeper than just a mastermind. So that's why I say I don't like masterminds, because it has to be deeper. I want to know when you're down, you should be able to reach out to me. I can pull you up because I'm going to be down. And when you're have that relationship, that deeper relationship. But in Michael's group, they do co-op buys. That takes a lot of trust, where, you guys all know your store names and you share, and everybody, there's some trust there. And that relationship is just so hard to find. And that's a very cool part of his program that I really like.
Yeah, no, I'm like you. I'm part of his. I'm in his warehouse, and it is true. And it's funny because like a lot of people have always wanted to do like these group buys, and they want to try it, and they want to do these things. And I will tell you, like, these things are not that easy. They can be very sticky, very complicated. Certain things, if you go back and you listen to, people, anyone goes out and they listen to your interviews of the young guns, and you think about realistically what we're talking about, from random people getting together and just kind of like coming up with goals and then trusting each other and doing different things. It's truly amazing what they've done, and as well as other people. Like, they were out in the front and people know them. There are lots of sub-micro groups, shall we call them, where, people's relationships, like yours and Andy's or other people's, where it's just a matter of, hey, I don't RA, but I know of this item. So let me just reach out and tell this person, because I'm not going to get it. Or maybe there's 100 available and they'll pick them up and we'll split them. Maybe not, whatever it is.
You spread out the risk, and you're not tying up as much cash. I've got a couple young gun stories. So we were going to ASD, my wife and I. We're flying out of Baltimore that day, and we get to the airport, and we're in line C, which if you're at Southwest, we're flying. When you get on the plane, all the window and the aisle seats are taken. So you're sitting in the middle no matter what, right? So we get on the plane, and we're walking on, and I'm in Baltimore, and I don't live anywhere near Baltimore. I get on, and I hear, Steve! It's two young guns, Matt Kelly and Todd Forster. They had the airline attendant standing in between them because they didn't want to give up anybody to sit in their seat. And so I had to sit with them. It was great. We flew to Vegas. And so, there were drinks flying or whatever. And we had such a great conversation to be able to talk to those two guys for 5.5 hours. And I like to talk, if you can't tell. It was amazing, though. Our relationship got that much stronger again, right? And so I ended up doing a deal with those two and KIB. We did a partnership on a deal, and that relationship has just gotten strong. And I just love working with them because I get access to those, and that developed because of the podcast. So there's another example, and we have an amazing product, an exclusive product, to be fair. And it took all four of us, because we each bring a skill set that's different, to make it happen. And I'm very lucky. My younger son goes to school by Todd Forster's warehouse. And we went by, I've been to Todd's place, and then him and I went by, and he's going to start working for him in September. And so imagine.
Doesn't he work for you now, though? Does that mean
he does.
He's an employee?
Yeah, he does. He works for the summer. Well, he's he's home for the summer, taking a class, working at a ballet school, actually, in the office. And then he works at our warehouse part-time. But, I want him to get perspective, and Todd's a great guy to get perspective, because Todd has a big operation, and it's all pallets. It's real heavy volume, huge volume. And he'll do probably $4 million in sales this year himself. But I want my son to get that perspective. And I think he can offer something for Todd, and so I'm really lucky for that. Again, it's relationships.
Okay. All right. All right. So we're coming up on about an hour. So I know I can talk to you for another few hours, and I know you've got plenty of.
I like to talk. I already did an 1.5-hour interview earlier today, so.
Yeah, and like given 109 of them, you're thinking about how many hours you could talk for, given all that knowledge. So if we were to try and, we've covered a lot of different ones. You've given a lot of great stories. I'm trying to think of, for me to say, hey, what are like the 3 greatest tips? It's impossible because I know there's so many different things and there's different business models.
I think we already said them though. It's networking. I mean, again, you've got to reach out. The thing we didn't talk about, and I do want to touch on, is conferences. You've got to go to conferences. If you're not, even if you're an introvert, you got to go to conferences. Go to CES, right? It's a great conference. Go to Chris Green's Scam Power conference. The ACE conference was great. There are meetup groups in your area. Like if we go to the Philly Gift Show, I always go and meet up with Bob Willie, and there's a whole group of sellers over there that you can meet up with. You've got to get to go and meet other sellers face to face, have lunch, dinner, whatever it is, look them in the eye and talk. That's what you got to do. That's the one. Everything else is great. You can listen to all the stuff that I do, and that's great. And you're going to learn a whole bunch of things, and you're going to be like, ooh, I'm going to jump to merch. Ooh, I'm going to jump to this. Oh, I'm going to jump to this. No. Go meet other sellers, find somebody you click with, and grow together. You will grow. You will be 2 together are 4, 3 are 6. I mean, it's really that exponential. That's the message.
All right. I wholeheartedly agree.
Barbara says to talk less. I do talk a lot. Barbara's an amazing interview too. She's amazing. She's the jet lady. She knows her stuff. Smart.
I don't think what he called it. I think she was saying more that one that goes to that conference should talk less, not you should talk less, but
I know she did. We sat next to each other at the Scam Power conference. I'm very cool.
I know. So, with that, I think people really can have great, takeaways on Stephen's website, on his e-commerce momentum podcast website. So it's e-commerce momentum, right?
e-commercemomentum.com. And actually I have a brand new website. It's finished finally. Okay.
You could type it in the
podcast player. Well, I can put it in there.
Yeah, but you could say it too, obviously.
Yeah, and the new one, it'll be actually launched next week. There's this one little thing that Nate McAllister's helping me with, but it's done, and the player is so much better. I'm so pleased with what it's become, and I'm really excited about, because I mean, the people that I have coming up on my interviews, I'm really excited. I mean, I just can't wait to talk to them because I get so pumped. I get jazzed. My wife, she laughs at me because I get pumped after every time I talk with somebody. I come out, man, I'm like, oh my God, this guy was so smart. I get jazzed. That's the phrase I use. I get jazzed over these things.
It's funny because I don't know how you do the interviews at night. Like people ask me, how do you work out at night? Because that's when I generally work out. Like this morning I worked out in the morning because I knew, I was going to be doing this with you tonight. I usually work out at night. People are like, well, how do you get to go to sleep? I'm like, no, my body's used to it. I don't know how you do the interviews, not because I'd be tired to do them, but because after I get done with them, the ideas would be flowing. I'd probably be up for like days. It's kind of like when we go to these conferences, and everybody stays up all night and whatever it is, and it's just a networking thing. The ideas are flowing. They're just like massive. And like, then you have to like kind of really focus to get the right ones and to focus on, hey, this makes sense. This may be great, but this is later. It's kind of like your whole merch, this, that, when merch, I remember when merch came out, I think it was the middle of fourth quarter. And I'm like, I can stop doing my Amazon business part-time and try and sell a couple of t-shirts. Well, let me focus on what's going on here. And I'm not saying not to do merch, and I don't mean to knock merch. I know people are making thousands of dollars a month.
Brandon Muller Green. Amazing.
There are, I will tell you, like I've started talking to a few merch sellers in the last few weeks. And again, networking, right? Like there are people I've met who at these conferences who are great sellers, and they may be transitioning away. They may not be. They may be just leveraging other things. It is amazing to see how many people are actually quietly really doing phenomenally well on merch and the strategies. It's really interesting. But anyway, the point is that there's just so many ideas out there. And like you said, you click with a few people, you get to know people, you go out there. And I think people who are maybe not a quote unquote big seller, and they have they're a little bit nervous to talk to someone, just find one person, talk to one person who also looks quiet and is shy or whatever it is. And like you said, the exponential factor is tremendous. I think, there are people I talk to who the few things that we talk about here and there, the leverage it gives me, or the, growth that I can get from that, they don't have to be something bigger than me. It's a matter of just one particular point that I gain from them. It can be tremendous. It doesn't have to be that, oh, I'm getting to talk to the $10 million person or the $5 million person, and therefore it works for me. It could be, you talk to some of these people who just started selling and they're doing less than $5,000 a month. They have a totally different perspective. And that's where I think the podcast is so, so cool, because you're just gaining perspective. And, I think everyone who's going to listen to this replay and who's here live, I think what you opened with, and if you weren't here live and you missed it, is so important. You said that you learn what you don't want to be doing. And I think that's a big thing from a leverage perspective, that don't do the things you don't want, but learn what those are. And so therefore you can find the way to outsource them. So, learning what not to do, networking, and kind of like finding what works for you. Big takeaways from our discussion tonight. So thank you for your time tonight.
Yeah, anytime.
And I will have this posted probably in a bunch of the groups once we download the recordings and everything.
And to say this too is, if somebody has somebody that they think could be an interesting interview for me, let me private message me. I'm on Facebook, because I'm always looking for an interesting story. And it doesn't have to be a sad, terrible story. I mean, I'll do those. But, I like the winner in the end kind of stories too, because I think everybody has a good story, and to find them, I mean, I'm very lucky. I have no end to who I can interview, but I always, some of my best interviews come from other people saying, hey, you didn't know this about Max Abreu, that he was a professional swimmer. Swimmer. I'm like, no, and that was a cool story, so somebody else told me, those kind of things. So if you have somebody, message me and I'll reach out to them.
Okay, great. So I appreciate the people that joined us live tonight. And then we will have all the replays posted. I think, I'm going to post some show notes places. So I'll be sure to put your website there for your podcast. And I think we will touch on groups and lists and stuff like that in some of the coming weeks, because I think there's a lot of what we talked about tonight. A lot of these points can be gained and gleaned into these lists and services. And even if it's not a whole hour discussion about, there's definitely some key takeaways. So
okay.
Thank you very much for tonight. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Take care.